A defense mechanism is a mechanism that has its greatest purpose to protect you from harm, from danger. So it's actually very valuable to us. Without a defense, we would be we would not survive, right? So from an evolutionary perspective, to have a defense is crucial. For example, if you're in a very dangerous situation where you are physically attacked, obviously you need to protect yourself, and that protection, like how your body reacts to the attack, that's a defense. And then, but since today we don't, live like in a really truly dangerous world where you have to be prepared to be attacked all the time. We live more civilized. So today, when we speak about defense mechanisms, we don't really talk about like only the physical defense, but also how we can create like defenses in terms of how we think or how we act, how we talk with other people. And that kind of defense also serves as a protection, but more as to protect us from not being too open emotionally, not being too vulnerable, not being too open for connection with other people. So that's also protection, but it might be in many situations that it actually harms us more than protect us, since when we are disconnected and when we distance ourselves from people, then that might have other consequences, like we feel more alone or being depressed or more anxious, since you experience like the world as a threat all the time. However, the defense was created once in a situation when you were a child, when you actually felt like it would be dangerous to be too open or too vulnerable or too much wanting to connect. Because if you think of a child, they are not so defensive yet. They are not so experienced with the world yet. So they get born and they of course are very open and vulnerable to the world and very helpless to whoever takes care of them. And they have great trust. That trust can really be broken if the caretaker of the baby doesn't really show up and isn't really present and show that you can trust in me, I'm taking care of you, and you can be vulnerable here with me, and I will protect you. So basically, if you've had a caretaker, like a parent, who you felt didn't protect you in every aspect of life, like giving you food and all the basic stuff, but then also like the more subtle stuff, like protect you. So it's created a safe space for you to be open with your emotions, to be open with your free thoughts, and to also be open for being like a complicated, being difficult, having like really regressive, complicated reactions. Like if your caretaker, the parent, cannot really deal with that, and maybe even shows signs of having hostile reactions to your vulnerability or neglectful reactions to your vulnerability, then the child very soon will learn that this is dangerous. It will learn that being open is dangerous. Being vulnerable might harm me. So because of that, the child unconsciously develops a defense. So instead of being open, eventually, like when it grows up, for example, when it feels sad, feels hurt, it has learned that I can't go to my parent when I feel hurt, because either they won't have time for me, or they will attack me, or they will start to cry themselves. So no, I just keep it to myself, and maybe instead of showing the sadness, I will be defiant instead, or I will be angry instead, or I will not show anything at all, or I will be very compliant and very kind and nice. So all those reactions then start to serve as a defense for the actual sadness that the child might have inside. So how the defense was created once actually did serve a purpose. So it did help you back then. But the problem is when you grow up then, and this child is now an adult and maybe meet a partner who, or a friend who is very much interested in his or her sadness. But then that sadness, you can't find it no more, because it's so automatic. Like whenever I feel sad, I should protect it. I should not show it. It's dangerous when I feel sad. So even it can be when I feel sad, I start to feel really anxious. Like the body is like signaling, like, okay, this is a threat coming. This is this now I should, put it in defense. And that can be also compared to like the fear you feel when you're like in a forest or something and you see a moose, or maybe that might not be so dangerous, but like in the savannah and you see a lion or something, then you feel really scared, and the threat is external, it's outside. But here the sadness is the lion. So the threat comes from within. And then the body like automatically like tells you, okay, now it's time to put in the defense. And when you have several of these defenses, the consequences are that you eventually feel very much alone, and you feel very, very detached from everyone else, even though you really aren't. You were when you were a kid, but today you don't have to be. So that's the complicated issue with a defense mechanism. It's truly helpful, but it might also be the cause of our psychological problems. Yeah, so the lion can be represented by actually anything that you have as an individual, first of all, an experience of as dangerous in your upbringing. So it can be sadness, if you had experience of not being met in a safe way as a child when you were sad. It can be fear, like if you grew up in an environment that where you learned that it was not okay or safe to express fear. Maybe you were scared all the time, but of your parents. Maybe you were scared of the ones who were supposed to take care of you. So then you learned that, okay, fear is something that I should take care of myself. So fear can be the lion. And also fear of then asking for help with your fear. So that's even, a double thing. That's even more complicated. Also anger can be the lion. So basically any core emotion can be perceived as a threat inside of you as a child. When you learn, not from one day to another, but it's, eventually growing up, you learn from experiences, trial and error, you learn that, okay, this is not safe for me to express. But then it can be like more, so to speak, global things, like you can be scared of not belonging to like another group. Like say you grew up and felt disconnected from your family, and say the setting, the circumstances were in your family when you grew up were not in your favor, so to speak. Maybe your parents were very busy, or they had other kids or something like that, so that maybe they didn't mean anything wrong and they didn't have the capacity to be there for everyone. But maybe for you, you experienced, you learned that, okay, I'm not included. They always forget about me. No one cares about me. So then when you grow up and you're in a context of a group, probably you will get reminded, okay, I'm not included. So groups, you will always then, maybe you get anxious and scared of groups. So then, like, the feelings around groups can be the lion. And that also is connected to this we call fear of missing out. So when you have a fear of missing out on something, it probably has to do with something like that you don't trust that you are actually in it all the time. You don't have to be actually physically in something to be included, because we are all included in the experience. So that can also be something that triggers a fear in you, or not only fear, but mixed emotions, all the emotions that got triggered when you were a kid in relation to not being part of a group. So that triggers like in the individual, but then whole cultures can also be keen to avoid or want to avoid certain emotions. For example, in Sweden, we are quite scared of conflicts. And anger is not an emotion that is very easy for us to experience and to express in a healthy way. That might have to do with how we haven't been actually officially in a war. That's just a thought, that then those things might actually influence the way we experience emotions or our relationship with certain emotions. For example, Germany is more, as a culture, I've spoken to many Germans, and also in comparison with Swedes, Germans are a lot more straightforward with their opinions, and they don't seem to be as phobic to anger. And that might be that they are more, as a culture, used to having a defense, or used to being more also offensive with, or have an offense with their opinions. And so I suppose one could, experiment of thinking of also defenses and what people in cultures are afraid of, and how they perceive threats and how they want to protect themselves. In the psychological literature, a very typical defense mechanism is to intellectualize instead of feeling. So that's a very typical example of a more civilized defense. I was talking before about, the more acute defense, like when you need to protect yourself, like with your fist when you're being attacked. That's also a defense that comes from fear and anger. But again, like in a more civilized society, or when you're not attacked acutely all the time, then we more talk about defense mechanisms as thoughts or behavior or emotions. And then intellectualization is a very common defense. And that comes from, for example, when you were a kid and you was brought up in a very sort of emotionally detached environment, where the parents or the family didn't express vulnerability and emotions freely, but were more, so to speak, detached and more held emotions to themselves. And they learned then that it's more safe to be detached and and have a strong intellect than to be vulnerable and open with my emotions. So that's a very common one. And that can be also be divided in certain subgroups, like also to rationalize is a common type of intellectualized defense. So for example, when you ask a friend, so how does it feel that your boyfriend just left you? Oh, it's a bit sad, but I understand him, it's okay, he had a tough life, so it's okay. So that's a very common way to rationalize, where you find a rational meaning to what happened, instead of opening up about how hurt you are, because you don't trust the environment to take care of your feelings. And also to minimize is the type of intellectualizing defense. So to the same question, it would be, so how do you feel about being left from your boyfriend. I don't think about it so much. It's okay, those things happen, and no, don't worry about it. So all the time you minimize yourself, and specifically your feelings, and in general yourself, which can have huge consequences actually on every area in your life, because that's a huge subject. When you minimize your feelings, you minimize your worth, you minimize your space here, your right to connect, your right for love, your right to be seen, and it actually leads, if you do it a lot, it can lead to really self-neglect, which is probably the environment that you were brought up in. I mean, you don't learn this, you learn this from somewhere, you just don't come up with it. So you were probably, minimized as a person or in your feelings, so that you learn to do it to yourself, and maybe also to other people to some extent. So that's also a common, where you need to have the right answers all the time. That's also a type of intellectualization, where you can never admit that you are wrong, which is being vulnerable. So you all the time say, for example, that your self-worth is dependent on your brain, like your intellect. Say that you were brought up in an environment where your parents say were very educated, academia was strong, and you understood that if I do well in school, if I always have the right answers, if I'm very smart, then I will get a lot of acknowledgement, then I will get love, then I will be accepted. So that's also a very typical defense to always do good, always be smart, always be right. And you experience that you cannot be human. Basically, you cannot expose yourself too much in not understanding. So that can be really stressful. So intellectualization is very strong, typical defense. Let's see, another very common and very complicated or very harmful defense, it can have a lot of bad consequences, is projection. So that's a more you would say regressive defense than intellectualization. Intellectualization is more mature defense, but projection comes from a more early age and also often gives more consequences. So I will talk about more thoroughly about what is a projection in another series, but just to mention here briefly, projection is basically how you project onto another person or onto a situation an image or a feeling or an interpretation, thoughts that you have in your own mind coming from a past experience, but you project the past experience onto a current experience. So that might be when someone, for example, is saying, I don't think you like me. And well, if you really don't resonate with what the person is saying to you, then it might be a projection. So that's when someone assumes something about you that is more like about themselves. And in couples therapy, that's a really common theme that you work with, because since when couples have problems, is most often that they are stuck in like a dynamic where they project their past history, their past experiences, but onto each other, which then they get them stuck in this unfair dynamic where no one of them feels understood, and both of them want the other one to understand. So that's really what you need to help a couple with, to really deactivate the projections. so that they can understand, well, I'm not having an argument with my partner, actually. I'm having an argument with my father. I see the image of my father and I put it on my partner. And the poor partner, feels unfairly treated and don't understand the accusations and don't really understand the process, and also then maybe projects an image of his mother on the partner, who were unfair towards him. And then so they're stuck in not having not really seeing each other, but only seeing a projection of the past. So that's a really complicated and harmful defense. Intellectualization is also harmful, but that's more, you don't really actively hurt someone, you just detach, so that more creates distance. And, stuff gets boring. But with a projection, it also, you can accuse someone or you get scared of someone. So then it actually creates a lot of harm in relationship, and it can become really, really toxic. Other examples, anger can also have a defensive effect. So anger is a core emotion, and we need anger. When expressed healthy, it's about expressing your boundaries, and actually it then provides connection. Because when you express your boundaries, then the other person or the community, they know then who you are more clearly. Because when you say, well, this is who I am, and I accept this and this, but not that, then you become more clear. But when you express anger more like in an accusing way, so you say, I need you to change. I did something wrong in you. Or just more primitively, just scream at someone, obviously. And then anger function more as a defense. Because then anger comes up as a result of fear, or as a consequence of fear. So then anger is not really anger, actually. Then anger, when it's defensive, it has its source in some sort of fear. Fear of what? Well, fear of not being listened to. So you scream, you sound more. Somehow you think that the other person will, see you or hear you better when you scream, but actually it's the opposite, because they just hear your scream, but you don't really see you. But it's a fear of, not being seen. And also if you are very controlling in your boundaries, saying, I need you to change, I need you to be in a certain way for me to be around you. I don't accept you that way, I want you this way. That also comes from fear, like fear of being not accepted, fear of being invaded with someone else's behaviors or thoughts. So that actually stems from not having boundaries, from not having enough self-worth, so that you feel safe with where you start and where you begin, so to speak. Where you start and so you don't feel safe and confident with who you are as a person. So that's a defensive anger then, when you want to control someone else. But healthy anger would be more to be responsible. So I'm okay with who you are. I'm okay with what you stand for and what you say, and I don't need to control you. But I need to remove myself from the situation right now to take care of myself, for example, since I'm anxious right now. Or it can be, okay, I hear what you say, but this is what I think. So you still stay in the situation, but you're very clear with, I hear and respect you and your opinions, but this is my opinions. That's also more healthy anger. So anger is also a common defense mechanism. So the sad thing about defenses is how they were developed in an environment where you really needed to be protected, but you weren't. So then your body sort of understood, okay, I'm in an environment where I'm not protected, and my existence is dependent on this environment. So then the body thinks, so what can I do to get the most out of my environment so that I can survive better? And the body gets, okay, if I'm sad, or if I'm angry, or if I'm vulnerable, or if I'm a difficult kid, then my environment will not cope with it very well, so then I won't get the most out of the environment. And then my chances to survive will be lessened. So then the body, okay, it develops these mechanisms, it shuts down, or it learns, it teaches the kid to manage himself on his own, to be more independent very early, for example. So the mechanism, the defense was developed for a good thing in the first place. It was like, actually, it saved us. It's like, was our best friend. Without the development of this defense, maybe we wouldn't have survived, actually. Or we would have been more crippled, say. Maybe we would have survived, physically, but emotionally we would have been, say, more crippled. Like if you are like open as a baby and your environment is is dangerous for you, or attacking you, or neglecting you when you're open, then obviously that's not a smart thing to continue doing. Like, say, if your neighbor has a dog and you go there to caress it or pet it, and then it bites you, then you would be stupid if you would go back to the dog like every day. Then obviously you don't go back. You protect yourself. So the defense was really created for you, to your advantage. It really saved you. It was your best friend. So the sad and the difficult thing is that, again, that in order for us to be truly safe as adults, we actually need to let go of that very best friend that saved us when we were a kid. Because the thing with the defense mechanism, it doesn't take away the pain. It doesn't take away the fear that we had as a kid. It doesn't take away how we were hurt. It just protects us. It's just put a barrier around it so that we can cope and that we can grow up and be okay. But the fear and the sadness and the pain and the unprocessed anger is still there. So we still, when we are adult, we're still prepared to be attacked, and we still have this emotional idea that if we are vulnerable, if we are open, then we will be hurt, we will be attacked, we will be neglected. So the tricky thing is, as an adult, to help the body to understand, okay, now it's time to let go of this defense so that we can bring out these emotions that are unprocessed, a kid's emotions, so that we can give the emotions a chance to get processed and to be taken care of in a safe environment. So that we can also eventually let go of those unprocessed emotions and go moving on in life, being healed and then more open, and to really build trust again, and to connect, and to do everything that we couldn't as a child, and actually to be more whole as a human. But how do we do that? How do we help our body to understand? So this best friend that saved you, you don't need it anymore. And it's okay to bring out these feelings that you were alone with as a kid. It's okay, you won't be hurt. You can't promise that you won't be hurt no more. So that question is a bit difficult. Should we have defense, or should we let go of them? But we can make it simple by saying, well, in some areas, obviously, in life, you will always need, defense. It's not it doesn't suit every situation in life to be open and unguarded. That would be naive. That would actually, that would hurt you if you think that, okay, I go to therapy and I heal and then I can be open and everyone will understand me and everyone will love me and I can tell everyone about who I am and everything that's going on in me. And that's because that's actually can be a negative consequences of going to therapy, that, you know, the patients start to call their parents and they want to talk with their parents and tell them about all of their hurt, and they want to talk with everyone, and they expect that they will be understood, and then they get really sad when, well, I've changed but my parents haven't, and I need to let go of that idea, that expectation that everyone will understand me, because they won't. So the most important person to understand me is obviously myself. So no, yes, in certain areas we need the defenses, but then we should learn in what areas and with whom we don't need the defenses. And hopefully in your close relationship, like with your partner if you have one, or with a really good friend, or with a therapist, there it's not very helpful for you to be defensive, because then you just recreate the traumatic situation. You feed the body with information that's not true. It's like the body still thinks that it needs to defend itself, and this pain inside, the fear inside, the unprocessed emotions inside still thinks that it's not safe to come out. So yeah, I would say that that's a huge part of learning. When you firstly, when you have identified that you have defenses, which we can talk about later on, but then to really also understand when I should have defense still and when I shouldn't. And I say that because actually, ironically, for a person with a lot of defenses that they have learned to have towards their family or to close people, it's not uncommon that very person is actually very naive to strangers and very open and unguarded to strangers. This is actually very common with patients who've been very neglected by their upbringing and their parents. So where they feel detached to their parents, but then they still have this urge to emotionally connect, and then they find people who are not safe for them, but they connect to those people, and they open up to those people. That might be a lot of stories then of how they have been tricked and betrayed, and also all of the sexual assaults and other invasive acts is very common with these patients who open themselves up and let go of defenses where they actually should keep them, and then they can't open up in situations where they should.